The first weekend of March Madness has concluded for both Texas basketball teams. The women will be headed to the Sweet 16. The men, unfortunately, are headed back to Austin.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. And remember, terms and conditions do apply. On today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, Vic Schaefer's squad is headed to the Sweet 16 after two dominant victories over Drexel and Alabama. In the second segment, your Texas baseball team has now won 5 of their last 6 games and has picked up consecutive series victories over Air Force and the Baylor Bears. And in the last segment, Rick Barnes wins a game in March. Unfortunately, it came at the expense of his former university and team. Rodney Terry and the Longhorns fall 62-58 to the Tennessee Volunteers in the round of 32. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So what we just experienced has to be the best weekend of the year. It has to be, if you're a sports fan, the best weekend of the year, right? Between the two March Madness tournaments, right, men and women's, in a 5-game span, in the first and second round, you get 96 high leverage win or go home college basketball games, right? In a span of 5 days, right? Then on top of that, you have the NIT, right? You're probably not watching that, but it's there, right? You have NBA teams playing their last 15 to 20 games, right? With playoff level intensity, fighting for seeding, awards, et cetera, et cetera. Then you have college baseball, right? In conference play, right? So those are some intense games. And then you have Major League Baseball, where spring training is ending, and the season starts for real on Thursday, right? Nothing about spring training. It just means that it's ending and the season is about to start for real. So this has to be the best weekend of the year, specifically talking about those 96 high leverage win or go home college basketball games in a span of 5 days. And man, was there a ton of high level hoops being played, and I did nothing but sit down on my couch, eat, and watch those high level hoops, man. It was just a great weekend. Has to be the best weekend of the year. And I know, to make it a holiday moving forward, I'm gonna start taking off work. I'm gonna start, throwing something on the grill, whatever I need to do, right? Because like I said, this is the best weekend of the year, and it owes me nothing after all the high level moments, memories, and hoops we saw over the past 5 days. And speaking of, right, high level hoops, we saw 2 really good games in Austin from the number 1 seed Texas women's basketball team, who now will be advancing to their 3rd Sweet 16 in the last 4 years. So just a hell of a coaching job this year by Vic Schaefer and staff, and a hell of a job by these players who overcame the loss of Rory Harmon to now make it to the Sweet 16. And they look like a legitimate national championship contender, a team that nobody should be surprised if they end up cutting down the nets at the end. Texas had a plus 51 point differential over the weekend, beating Drexel by 40 points on Friday, and then coming back on Sunday in the Moody Center once again and beating Alabama by 11 points. And now they will play the winner of tonight's game between Utah and Gonzaga this Friday in Portland. So they get a nice little rest as they head to the West Coast and get ready to play once again the winner of Utah and Gonzaga in Portland in the Sweet 16. So this past Friday, Texas was able to beat Drexel by 40 points, 82-42, to win their first tournament game this year in the NCAA tournament. And not only, let me backtrack a little bit, Texas had a big size advantage, right? A really big size advantage against Drexel. You see this a lot, with 1 seeds against 16 seeds in the tournament, or 2 seeds against 15 seeds, where these are teams that win their conference tournaments, but they don't have the size, right, to face off against a team like a Texas or, a South Carolina, 1 seeds in the women's tournament. And so there was an obvious size mismatch against Drexel, and Vic Schaefer and his squad took advantage of it for 40 minutes, right? They came into the game. This is a team already that scores 50%, 50+% of their points in the paint. But when you look down there and they're not nearly as big as you are in the paint, then it's like, yeah, we're going to spam that a little bit more today, right? So not only did it show up in points in the paint, right? Texas scored 44 of their 82 points in the paint, but Texas also out rebounded Drexel by 28 rebounds, getting offensive rebounds on 26 of the 40 shots that they missed in the game. So it was just pure dominance inside in terms of scoring the basketball, rebounding the basketball offensively and defensively. And of those 82 points total, 74 of them came in the paint on free throws or three-pointers. So the plan of attack was very calculated, even though you have one of the best mid-range snipers and scorers in the country in Madison Booker, right? The plan was to get the ball inside, let Taylor Jones and Aaliyah Moore score the basketball inside. If they can't stop you, they'll foul you. You'll get to the free throw line that way. And if they collapse on you, we'll get the ball out to open three-point shooters. And they did that as well with 5 3-pointers made in the game. And when you look at Madison Booker, right, she had to affect the game in a different way, playing the point guard position. We saw in her last game against Iowa State where she had 26 points, right, and was just dominant in the mid-range and led the team in scoring. But this time she only had 8 points, but had her career high in assists with 14. Did a really good job of dishing the basketball, especially inside to those post players, and then getting the ball out to Shaylee Gonzalez on the three-point line, who made 5 threes in this game. Taylor Jones and Amo or Leah Moore combined for 28 points as starters, mostly in the paint. And Deanna Gaston and Khadijah Faye gave you 21 points and 17 rebounds off the bench. Once again, just taking advantage of that size mismatch inside. As mentioned previously, Shaylee Gonzalez went off for 21 points, hitting all 5 of the Longhorns 3 points made, right? They went 5 for 10 on the game, and she made all 5 of them. And then defensively, Drexel only scored 42 points in 40 minutes, which is not good, on 35% shooting, while Texas had 20 steals plus blocks. So, obviously this is a game that Drexel virtually had no chance of winning, right? But Texas still had to come out and, show why they were a 1 seed and dominate Drexel. And they did that offensively and defensively, winning that game by 40 points and just bullying them inside on the boards and just scoring under the basket. On Sunday against Alabama, we definitely faced a tougher test, a really good SEC team who, has played games this year against Tennessee, LSU and South Carolina. So they're definitely battle tested. I think they were 24-9 coming into the game, and definitely had some really good players, and they made the game interesting at times. But, Texas still found a way to get out of there with a double-digit victory, beating Alabama 65-54. And Texas, once again, in this game, got whatever they wanted inside, scoring 34 points in the paint when they only had 65 points total. But the lack of efficiency, especially in close, continues to be alarming at times, right? That's something that has plagued this Texas women's basketball team throughout the year. And, they say that, what plagues you in the regular season will continue to plague you in the playoffs. I'll talk about that a little bit more specifically because man did it show up this weekend for the Texas men's basketball team. But, Texas scored 65 points. They were really good inside, but they only shot 40% from the floor, right? And a lot had to do with them missing 15 plus layups at the rim. And that's not an exaggeration. They did miss 15 plus layups at the rim. So that's something that has to be cleaned up. And I know that in this week of practice, ahead of them going to Portland, right, for the Sweet 16, I know that Vic Schaefer is going to hammer that down in practice that, we can beat Alabama and Drexel missing all those shots at the rim. But if we want to beat South Carolina, USC, Iowa, LSU, Stanford, who's in our region, teams like that, you're going to have to be a lot better and efficient in terms of cashing in those opportunities when you get that close to the basket. Your post players and Jones, Gaston, and Moore combined for 35 points and 25 rebounds, which is a really good output against anybody. But they also shot 41% from the field. And like I said, missed 15 plus shots at the rim. That's not going to cut it against some of these better teams in the sport. Shea Holly and Shaylee Gonzalez went 2 for 12 with only 3 of those misses coming from 3-point range, right? So they were able to get inside, but missed some easy opportunities at the basket as well. Madison Booker definitely did the scoring today. No 14 assist performance. She only had 2, but she put on another mid-range masterclass with 21 points and also had 6 rebounds. Aaliyah Moore, although she did miss some easy opportunities at the rim, had 21 points, 10 rebounds overall, and made the team's only 3-pointer in this game. And defensively, Texas was just lights out once again, forcing 20 steals plus blocks and getting 18 offensive rebounds on 36 missed shots. So in 2 games in the Moody Center over the weekend on Friday and Sunday, Texas definitely proved why they were a 1 seed. They validated why they were a 1 seed, I should say. And I think they showed that they can play with any team in the country when they're playing at their best. But I think they also showed that if they have the inability to convert those easy opportunities inside and dominate in the paint the way that they were able to do against Alabama and Drexel, if you can't make those shots inside, or if you're going to miss 15 plus layups, that's going to affect you greatly against teams like South Carolina, Iowa, USC, LSU, Stanford, et cetera, et cetera. So once again, this Texas team, it shouldn't surprise anybody if they cut down the nets at the end and win the national championship, but they definitely have some things to clean up on the way there. Quick word from our sponsors, and then we talk about the Texas baseball team, who is now on a heater and has won 5 of their last 6 games. Today's episode of Locked on Longhorns is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. But LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Remember, terms and conditions do apply. Today's episode of Locked on Longhorns also is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked on and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. All right, before we get into the Texas baseball team, I just want to say that, if you do bet on, players or games, I'm not necessarily endorsing betting, even though I do it. And, a lot of our ads are advertising gambling. But if you do, I just want to say, man, was this just such a good weekend to make some money, right? And I hope everybody made some money. I made a nice little chunk of change over the weekend. I just feel like in terms of, March Madness, like I said, there's 96 high leverage basketball games. So there's going to be upsets. And, sometimes you can anticipate those upsets if a team is underseeded or lower seeded, or it's just Kentucky in the first round, right? And it never hurts to just put some money on Kentucky's opponent in the first round because you never know what they're going to do, right? And then I felt like the players, if you're a prop better, I mean, all of the players were just going off, right? Like the star players on each team, from Zach Edey to Jaden Ledee from San Diego State, from the big dude for Oregon. Like, I mean, just all the star players, right, in the tournament were going off for their respective teams. I've never seen so many overs hitting college basketball, right? Like, because they play 8 less minutes and it's such a physical game. But I swear everybody's over was hitting all weekend in the first round of the tournament. So really good money making opportunity over the past weekend, and one of the best weekends of the year, the best weekend of the year, in my opinion. I made a nice little chunk of change. Hopefully you made some money as well. Now, what was money was the Texas baseball team, who has now won 5 out of their last 6 games, ahead of a game tomorrow night against Texas A&M Corpus Christi, their last game in a 10-game homestand. And they've now won consecutive series against Air Force during the midweek and then Baylor over the weekend, taking 2 out of 3. The Texas baseball team is now 15-9 on the season. Now, the series didn't start the best way when they lost the first game on Friday, 4-3 to Baylor in extra innings. Texas Longhorns took a 1-0 lead early in the game on an RBI ground out. They got 2 singles to open up the game, but then 3 straight ground ball outs. They were able to score a run, but were limited to 1 run because they could not do anything besides provide outs after those 2 straight singles. Baylor would tie the score at 1-1 with an RBI double in the next half inning. But Texas would take the lead in the third on an RBI single and go up 2-1. But in the 7th inning, Baylor would take the lead, scoring 2 runs to go up 3-2, getting 2 more runs off of LBJ in the 7th inning. Overall, LBJ pitched well, going 7 innings and allowing 3 runs. But, aces never get the same run support as the rest of the staff does. And Texas only could score 3 runs on the day. And LBJ got his 2nd loss of the year after putting together a really good quality start. Once again, quality start, 6 innings pitched or more, 3 3 runs earned or less, right? 3 earned runs or less. I was trying to figure out how I wanted to say it, which one made more sense. So anyway, it's now 3-2, right? After Baylor scored those 2 runs off of LBJ in the 7th inning, the Longhorns loaded the bases in the 8th with no outs, but could only score once on a double play to tie the game. So it's now 3-3. And then Baylor would score the winning run in the 11th inning on an RBI double. Right. And like I said, LBJ, he's the ace, so he never gets good run support. Maybe it's because usually they're matched up against aces. So the batters or the bats are going against another ace. Maybe that's why. But yeah, aces don't get great run support. But then of course the next day, Texas comes back and scores 10 runs. Right. So Texas received back-to-back elite pitching performances, this time from Ace Whitehead, who pitched all 9 innings, allowing just 2 runs and 7 base runners. I believe it was the weekend prior in the Washington series where he had that 7 innings of relief and didn't give up a run. So 2 back-to-back really strong performances from Ace Whitehead. And if he's going to pitch like this, it completely changes the trajectory of this Texas baseball team and that pitching that's been extremely inconsistent for the Longhorns thus far. Once again, Ace Whitehead pitched all 9 innings, allowing just 2 runs and 7 base runners. And over the final 6 innings, he only allowed 1 base runner. So he was dominant and got better as the game went on. Texas jumped out to a 4-0 lead in the first on an RBI single and then 3-run homer by Will Gasparino. Baylor would get a sac fly in the 2nd inning to cut it to 4-1, but Jared Thomas matched that in the bottom of the inning with a solo homer to make it 5-1. Baylor scored again in the 3rd, making it 5-2, and they were threatening to make it 5-3, but Porter Brown threw a runner out at home plate. We've seen that a few times at the 40 acres. He has a dandy of an arm, right? A really strong arm in the outfield. And then he did it last year against his former team, and TCU was one of the best moments of the season. And then Texas would score 5 more runs in the game, courtesy of an RBI single, double, and 2 home runs, making the score 10-2 and getting a much-needed victory to tie the series against the Baylor Bears. And they would come back on Sunday and win the rubber match 11-1. So the Longhorns got their 3rd quality start in 3 games over the weekend with Max Grubbs pitching 7 innings of 1-run ball. You would hope with 3 quality starts you would get a sweep, but 2 out of 3 isn't bad, and it's something to work on moving forward, right? Texas scored 5 runs in the 1st inning, courtesy of an RBI single, a wild pitch, and then 2 home runs. Max Bellew would hit his 2nd homer of the game in the 4th inning as Texas took a 6-0 lead. Baylor was able to score a run off of Grubbs in the 7th, hitting 3 straight singles in the inning to make it 6-1. But in the 8th inning, Texas loaded the bases with 3 straight singles before Max Bellew hit his 3rd homer of the game, this time a grand slam. And then Texas would reload the bases again after Max Bellew's grand slam in the same inning, and they would score an RBI ground out, which triggered the mercy rule in the 8th inning at 11-1. So Texas got 2 huge victories, especially outscoring Baylor 21-3 the last 2 games of the series after losing on Friday night. And now they will play Texas A&M Corpus Christi at home on Tuesday. So 2 straight series wins for this baseball team. 5 out of 6 in terms of their overall victories in the last 6 games. Really good performance for the Texas baseball team. They're hitting on all cylinders. We talked about how that game where they were down 5-3 in the bottom of the 9th against Air Force and came back and walked it off could propel this team to play some really good baseball moving forward. And since that moment, really before that, because they won the game before that and then, showed the resilience in that game, they've played some really good baseball over the last week, for sure, especially over their last 6 games. A quick word from our sponsors, and we have to give the moratorium on the Texas basketball team under Rodney Terry. The men lost to Rick Barnes and the Tennessee Volunteers in the round of 32. What happened this season, and why are the Longhorns headed home earlier than they should have been and a lot earlier than they went home last season? Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by Nissan. This week's March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest, just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs. These guys were able to take it to the next level. I want to give credit to Gonzaga on this one, right? I want to give credit to Gonzaga. I know that we're now in a society where championship culture has just ran rampant, and we feel like Gonzaga is not a successful program because they haven't won a national championship, even though they've been to 2 title games. And Mark Few is not one of the best coaches we've ever seen in college basketball because he doesn't have the one championship to his name. But when you look at it, when he's been able to do, making 24 straight NCAA tournaments at Gonzaga, I think 8 straight Sweet 16s, I think over double-digit years since they've lost in the first round. It's just sustained elite level success at Gonzaga, and it's really hard to win a championship, especially at a school like Gonzaga where you're not always getting the top recruits, but it's really hard to win a championship period in college basketball. I mean, look at all the NBA players that, Coach Cal has brought into Kentucky, and he has won with Anthony Davis, right? So it's just so hard to get into this tournament setting where anything can happen, where you have to travel to neutral sites, where one loss ends your season, and to be able to get to 8 straight Sweet 16s is just truly remarkable. So, he catches too much heat because he hasn't won a championship. Gonzaga gets too much heat because they haven't won a championship. But what Mark Few has done at Gonzaga has been nothing short of amazing. And this team looks like they can definitely go further than the Sweet 16 after what they did to Kansas. I mean, they ran Kansas off the floor. Kevin McCullers or not. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. All right, talking about the Texas basketball team. And, I think in a weird way, I know the University of Texas is not about moral victories. That's not what we do at UT. And so I don't want to come on here and just give the Texas basketball team a ton of praise, right? But two things. I think ultimately this season was a success for this specific group, and I'll tell you why. And I think that what you saw on Saturday, right? But sorry, I had to pause it, so that's going to sound a little bit choppy. But reiterating what I was saying is, I think that what you saw this weekend is a glimpse of what this basketball team could be, and then all of the reasons that held this basketball team from being exactly that. Like, I think you saw all of that, or a microcosm of that, in the Tennessee game. And I picked Texas to beat Tennessee when I made my bracket. I said this is a team that could get to the Sweet 16, right? And it just goes back to, jumping on Mark Few because he hasn't won a championship. Anything could happen in this tournament in a one-game scenario, right? Like, none of us, well, I would say none of us, right? But most people didn't think Oakland would beat Kentucky, right? Like, it just happens in this type of tournament. But I did think that Texas could make the Sweet 16, but I also very clearly saw after watching all of these games over the weekend that Texas was not one of the 16 best teams in the country, right? So it just goes back to the tournament format. And like I said, I think we saw the best version of Texas at times in that Tennessee game, but we also saw the reason that they never really reached the best version of themselves this year. And to me, and I said it after the Iowa State game, I think that we just have to be honest and say we didn't have the guys, right? It felt like we had the guys maybe early on, but we just didn't really have the guys. When you're watching all of these other basketball teams, how they play, how they make shots, right? How connected they are offensively and defensively. You never saw that at a high level from this Texas basketball team. And I don't think they really had it to give, right? Much of the season. And what plagues you in the regular season usually comes back to bite you in the postseason, right? When we look at it, we had players like Dylan Dessou, right? And Dylan Dessou was really good for us this year, first team all Big 12. But when it mattered the most, he scored 24 points in 2 games in the NCAA tournament on 36 shots, right? We lost the game to Tennessee by 4 points, in which our best player was abysmal, right? Outside of a clutch streak at the end. Who knows what would have happened? Who knows if Texas would still be playing right now if their best player played like their best player this weekend in the NCAA tournament? But that can happen, right? In 1 to 2 game scenarios. Max Asmus, right? He continues to get, the best PR in the country for being one of our best players. But the truth is, since January 1st, right? It's really since conference play started, Max Asmus has not been the Max Asmus we were used to seeing at Oral Roberts. In fact, in the last 22 games for the Texas Longhorns, which includes a game against UTA, conference play, and then the 2 games against Colorado State and Tennessee, Max Asmus shot under 40%, not under 50%, under 40% in 12 of those 22 games. So essentially, since the turn of the calendar year, in the majority of our games, he has shot under 40%, right? Max Asmus has been a hell of a college basketball player, but he was not the same player this year for the University of Texas, and especially when we got to conference play, Max Asmus was not the dominant scorer we're used to seeing. Like I said, the majority of his games since January 1st, he has shot under 40%, right? And then you got Tyrese Hunter, Dylan Mitchell, and just everybody else. It's just a bunch of guys, right? I think coming into the year, we thought players would take huge steps. We thought Max Asmus would continue to be one of the best scorers in the country for us. We thought Dylan Dessou would take a huge next step, which he did. Unfortunately, he just had 2 really bad shooting games in the tournament. And Dylan Mitchell and Tyrese Hunter were good for you at times, but they never took that leap that you needed them to take to continue to be an Elite 8 level basketball team. So love all the players on this team. And obviously they gave us great effort and they gave us a really good season. But we have to be honest and say we did not have the guys this year. We did not have the guys to make a run or consider ourselves one of the best teams in the country. One of the best teams in the country simply were not. In terms of what happened on Saturday, I talked about what plagues you in the regular season, plagues you in the postseason, and all of our biggest flaws came out tenfold, right? All season, this team got out-rebounded by their opponents and rarely were the most physical team on the court. Defensive rebounds were even in this game. I think they had 1 more defensive rebound, but Tennessee had 7 more offensive rebounds than Texas did in a 4-point game. All season, this team had careless turnovers that limited their scoring opportunities while giving easy buckets to the opponent. And in this game, Texas had 17 turnovers, most of them unforced. 10 of those came from Max Asmus and Tyrese Hunter, your veteran guards who were supposed to carry this team. Tennessee had 10 more shot attempts than Texas. All season, Texas has shown an inability to knock down the outside shot with any type of consistency. And on Saturday, they shot 30% from 3 and shot 8 for 37 from 3 the entire weekend. This was a team that desperately depended on their best players to carry them offensively. But in the tournament, the opposite happened. Over the weekend, in the 2 games, 1 victory, 1 loss, Dylan Dessou and Max Asmus combined for 46 points on 61 shot attempts. Kendall Weaver scored the same amount of points as Dylan Dessou this weekend and outscored Max Asmus. IT Horton gave you 2 points in 25 minutes this weekend. Dylan Mitchell gave you 6 points in 49 minutes this weekend. All right, Brock Cunningham had 3 points and 3 turnovers in a game against Tennessee and a flagrant foul that led to 5 points for Tennessee. So he probably gave up 10 plus points to Tennessee while only scoring 3 points himself. We just have to be honest and say we did not have the guys. Was Rodney Terry perfect this year? No. Did this team reach their full potential this year? No. Could this team have been better? Certainly, right? But I think getting to the round of 32 was a good season for this Texas basketball team because we simply did not have the guys. Now, next year, when we have a top 5 player at the guard position and Trey Johnson with 2 really good top 50 freshmen coming along with him and some of the veteran players on this team that stay and develop and maybe some really good players out of the portal, we will expect more from this Texas basketball team. We expected more coming into this season. But when you look at it, right, when you look at what we had on this roster and what they were able to accomplish getting to the second round of 32, I think that was essentially the proverbial ceiling for this basketball team. Yes, they could have found a way to beat Tennessee and made it to the Sweet 16. But like I said, they were not one of the 16 best teams in the country, right? And they would have only made it to the Sweet 16 because they were better than Tennessee on that day. But they were not a better basketball team than Tennessee. And in the moments in the margins, right, where Texas had to be a better basketball team in terms of rebounding, or be a better basketball team in terms of shot making, or be a better basketball team in terms of not turning the ball over, they could not do that. And that's why Tennessee squeaked out with a 4-point win over a Texas team that they probably should have blown out by 20 plus, right? So like I said, it was a good season for these guys. And I know we expected a lot more, but we just didn't get nearly what we expected from Dylan Mitchell, Tyrese Hunter, or Max Asmus over the course of the season. Dylan Dessou had his 2 worst games probably as a Longhorn in the NCAA tournament. And just frankly, we just did not have the guys that we had last year that carried us to an Elite 8 run and possibly could have taken us further. We did not have the level of talent on this team to have expected them to go any further than they did in the round of 32. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.